Grown man took a pic of my child at the pool. Today was supposed to be a perfect family outing. My husband and I decided to take our kids to the water park, a much-needed break from the daily grind. As we arrived at the park, we were greeted by the warm smiles of our extended family and friends who had joined us for the day. The weather couldn't have been better. The sun was shining bright, and a gentle breeze kept us comfortable. We found a spot to set up our belongings and laid out a spread of fresh fruit for everyone to enjoy. The vibrant colors of the watermelon, strawberries, and grapes added to the festive atmosphere. But the real highlight of the day was taking our 9-month-old baby swimming for the first time. Everyone gathered around, eager to witness this precious moment. As we stepped into the pool, the baby's eyes widened with curiosity and excitement. We gently lowered her into the water, supporting her tiny body as she experienced the sensation of floating for the first time. Her giggles and splashes brought joy to everyone's faces. It was a heartwarming sight to see our little one taking her first steps into a new world. The day continued with endless fun and laughter. The older kids raced down the water slides, their screams of delight echoing through the park. Adults lounged in the lazy river, letting the current carry them away from their worries. It was a perfect escape, a day filled with happiness and togetherness. As the sun reached its peak, my oldest daughter, now 13, and I decided to take a break from the water. We made our way to a nearby table, seeking a moment of respite from the lively atmosphere. She stood behind me as I sat down, and we fell into an easy conversation, enjoying some quality mother-daughter time. We talked about her dreams and aspirations, her hopes for the future. She shared stories about her friends and the latest trends at school. I listened intently, cherishing every word, every laugh, every moment of connection. It was in these simple exchanges that I felt the unbreakable bond between us, a love that would withstand any challenge. Little did I know that our perfect day was about to take a dark turn. As I turned to look at my daughter, my heart skipped a beat. I saw something that shattered the idyllic bubble we had been living in. In that moment, I realized that even in the midst of joy and innocence, the world could be a cruel and dangerous place. My eyes widened in disbelief as I processed the scene unfolding before me. There, standing a short distance away, was an elderly man, probably in his 60s or 70s, holding his phone up in our direction. At first, I thought nothing of it, assuming he was simply taking a selfie or capturing the lively atmosphere of the water park. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The man had his phone on selfie mode, and on the screen I could clearly see that he was taking a picture of my daughter from behind. My heart raced as a mix of anger, disgust, and fear coursed through my veins. How dare he violate my daughter's privacy like that? How long had he been watching her, objectifying her young body? Without a second thought, I jumped up from my seat, my maternal instincts taking over. I lunged towards the man, my hand outstretched, and grabbed his phone with a force I didn't know I possessed. He looked startled, his eyes wide with shock as I confronted him. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. "How dare you take pictures of my daughter without her consent?" The man stumbled back, his face turning pale as he realized he had been caught. He stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but I wasn't having any of it. I had seen the evidence with my own eyes, and there was no denying his deplorable actions. By this time, the commotion had attracted the attention of the water park staff. They rushed over, concerned looks on their faces as they tried to assess the situation. I quickly explained what had happened, showing them the man's phone and the incriminating picture he had taken. The staff members were appalled and immediately took action. They called for security and informed the man that his behavior was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. As they escorted him away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief that he had been caught and would face consequences for his actions. But my relief was short-lived as I turned to face my daughter. She stood there, her eyes filled with confusion and a hint of fear. My heart broke as I realized that this incident had tainted what should have been a perfect day, a cherished memory of family bonding and joy. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close as I tried to find the right words to comfort her. How could I explain to her that there were people in this world who would objectify and violate her innocence? How could I protect her from the harsh realities that women face every day? As I held my daughter, I silently vowed to do everything in my power to support her, to empower her, and to ensure that she would never have to face such a traumatic experience again. But deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey, one that far too many women have to navigate in a world that often fails to respect and protect them. As the staff members took control of the situation, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The shock and anger that had initially consumed me began to give way to a deep sadness and concern for my daughter's well-being. I looked at her, trying to gauge her reaction, but she seemed to be processing the events in her own way. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. It was the man's daughter, a woman who appeared to be in her early 40s. She rushed over to us, her face contorted with a mix of disbelief and defensiveness. "My dad is not like that," she shouted, her words laced with desperation. "He would never do something so disgusting. There must be some misunderstanding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she defend her father's actions? The evidence was clear as day, and yet she seemed determined to paint him as the victim. It was a stark reminder of how deeply ingrained the culture of denial and victim blaming can be. The woman's outburst only added to the chaotic scene unfolding around us. Staff members tried to calm her down, explaining the seriousness of the situation, but she remained adamant in her defense of her father. The tension in the air was palpable, and I could feel my own emotions threatening to boil over. Amidst the commotion, I turned my focus back to my daughter. She stood there, her eyes wide and her face pale. I could see the confusion and fear etched on her delicate features, and my heart shattered into a million pieces. I gently took her hand and led her away from the chaos, finding a quiet spot where we could sit and talk. As we settled down, I struggled to find the right words to comfort her. How could I explain the inexplicable? How could I reassure her that she was safe when the world had just shown her its darkest side? "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "What that man did was wrong, and it's not your fault. You did nothing to deserve this." My daughter looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm okay, Mom," she said softly, trying to be brave. "I just don't understand why he would do something like that." Her words pierced my soul, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. No child should ever have to grapple with the harsh realities of sexual harassment and objectification. It was a burden that far too many women carried, and the thought of my daughter experiencing it at such a young age broke my heart. I pulled her into a tight embrace, wishing I could shield her from the pain and the ugliness of the world. I wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, that she would never have to face something like this again. But deep down, I knew that would be a false promise. As we sat there, holding each other, I couldn't help but reflect on the long-lasting impact this incident would have on my daughter. She may claim to be okay now, but I knew that the memory of this day would stay with her forever. It was a harsh reminder that as women, we are constantly vulnerable to the predatory behavior of others, and that the fight for safety and respect is an ongoing battle. As I held my daughter close, my mind raced with thoughts of the future. How would this incident shape her perception of the world? Would she grow up to be cautious and guarded, always looking over her shoulder, never fully trusting the intentions of others? The weight of these questions hung heavy on my heart. I thought back to my own experiences as a woman, the countless times I had been objectified, harassed, and made to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. It was a reality that I had learned to navigate, but one that I had hoped my daughter would never have to face. And yet here we were, confronted with the harsh truth that no one is immune to the pervasive nature of sexual harassment. As we sat in silence, I couldn't help but think of the countless other women and girls who had endured similar experiences. The statistics were staggering. 81% of women have been subjected to sexual harassment at some point in their lives. It was a number that made my stomach churn and my heart ache. I thought of the women who had been catcalled on the streets, groped on public transportation, or had their personal space invaded by entitled men. I thought of the countless stories of abuse, assault, and trauma that so many women carried with them, the scars that never fully healed. It was a reality that we, as a society, had become far too complacent with. We had normalized the objectification of women's bodies, the casual disregard for their autonomy and dignity. We had created a culture where men felt entitled to take what they wanted, without consequence or accountability. As I sat with my daughter, I knew that I had a responsibility to not only support her through this difficult time, but also to be a voice for change. I needed to have honest conversations with her about the realities of the world we live in, to equip her with the tools and knowledge to navigate it safely. But more than that, I needed to be an advocate for all women, to speak out against the pervasive culture of sexual harassment and abuse. I needed to challenge the societal norms that allowed this behavior to go unchecked, to demand better from the men in our lives and the institutions that were meant to protect us. It was a daunting task, one that often felt insurmountable in the face of such deeply ingrained attitudes and behaviors. But as I looked at my daughter, I knew that I had no choice but to fight. For her, for myself, and for every woman who had ever been made to feel less than, objectified, or violated. As we sat there, the weight of the world on our shoulders, I made a silent promise to my daughter. I would do everything in my power to create a safer, more just world for her to grow up in. I would be her rock, her advocate, and her unwavering support system. Together, we would navigate the challenges that lay ahead, and we would emerge stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever to create change. As the gravity of the situation settled upon me, I realized that I couldn't face this alone. I needed support, guidance, and a community of women who understood the depth of the pain and anger I was feeling. I turned to the one place where I knew I could find solace and understanding, my friends and fellow mothers. With a heavy heart, I reached out to them, pouring out my story and the tumultuous emotions that came with it. I told them about the perfect day that had turned into a nightmare, about the elderly man who had violated my daughter's innocence, and about the chaos that had ensued. As I typed out the words, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. There was something cathartic about sharing my experience, about giving voice to the pain and the anger that had been consuming me. And as the responses started pouring in, I realized that I was not alone. My friends and fellow mothers rallied around me, offering words of comfort, support, and understanding. They shared their own stories of harassment and abuse, the scars that they carried with them every day. They validated my feelings, reassuring me that my anger and sadness were justified, and that I had every right to feel the way I did. But more than that, they offered practical advice and guidance. They encouraged me to seek professional help for my daughter, to find a therapist who could help her process the trauma and develop healthy coping mechanisms. They suggested books and resources that could help me navigate the difficult conversations that lay ahead, to find the right words to empower and protect my child. They also reminded me of the importance of self-care, of taking time to heal and process my own emotions. They offered to be there for me, to listen without judgment, and to provide a safe space for me to express my fears and frustrations. As I read through their messages, I felt a sense of gratitude and love that I had never experienced before. These women, many of whom I had never met in person, had become my lifeline, my support system, and my source of strength. I realized that this was the power of community, of women coming together to lift each other up and to fight against the injustices that we faced every day. It was a reminder that we were not alone, that there was hope and healing to be found in the bonds of sisterhood. With renewed determination, I turned my attention back to my daughter. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be moments of pain and setbacks along the way. But I also knew that I had an army of women behind me, ready to support and guide me every step of the way. To my fellow mothers, my sisters in arms, I say thank you. Thank you for your love, your wisdom, and your unwavering support. Thank you for reminding me that I am not alone, that we are in this fight together. And to my daughter, I make this promise. I will never stop fighting for you, for your safety, and for your right to live in a world free from harassment and abuse. Together we will rise above this, and we will emerge stronger, more resilient, and more united than ever before. As the staff members escorted the elderly man away, I thought the chaos would subside. Little did I know that the confrontation was far from over. Suddenly, a woman in her early 40s came rushing towards us, her face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. It was the man's daughter. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice loud and accusatory. "Why are you taking my father away?" I tried to explain the situation calmly, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The woman was adamant in her defense of her father, refusing to believe that he could be capable of such a deplorable act. "My dad is not like that," she shouted, her eyes blazing with indignation. "He would never do something so disgusting. This is all a misunderstanding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could she be so blind to the evidence that was right in front of her? The man had been caught red-handed, his actions captured on his own phone screen. And yet his daughter seemed determined to paint him as the victim, to shift the blame onto anyone but him. The chaotic scene intensified as the woman continued her tirade, her voice growing louder and more aggressive with each passing second. Staff members tried to intervene, to calm the situation and explain the gravity of the man's actions, but she would not be swayed. "You're all making a mistake," she screamed, her face turning red with rage. "My father is a good man and he doesn't deserve to be treated like a criminal." I felt my own anger rising, my patience wearing thin in the face of such blatant denial and defensiveness. How could she not see the pain and trauma that her father had inflicted on my daughter, on our family? How could she be so willing to turn a blind eye to the truth? But even as I struggled to contain my own emotions, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for the woman. I could only imagine the shock and disbelief she must have been feeling, the cognitive dissonance that came with realizing that someone you loved and trusted was capable of such a heinous act. And yet, that sympathy was quickly overshadowed by the realization that her defense of her father was a symptom of a much larger problem. It was a reflection of the way in which our society often prioritizes the reputation and well-being of men over the safety and dignity of women and girls. I watched as the woman continued to argue with the staff, her voice growing more and more shrill with each passing minute. The chaos of the scene was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the peaceful and joyful atmosphere that had preceded it. And yet, even in the midst of the turmoil, I couldn't help but feel a sense of determination and resolve. I knew that I would not back down, that I would not let this man's actions go unchallenged. I would fight for my daughter, for her right to feel safe and respected in this world. As the confrontation continued to unfold, I held my daughter close, shielding her from the worst of the chaos. I whispered words of love and reassurance, promising her that I would always be there to protect her, to fight for her, no matter what. And as I stood there, surrounded by the din of angry voices and the weight of a society that too often fails its women and girls, I knew that this was only the beginning. There was still so much work to be done, so many battles to be fought. But I also knew that I was not alone, that there were countless other mothers and women who stood with me, ready to take on the fight. As the chaos of the confrontation subsided and the man's daughter was finally led away by the staff, I found myself consumed by a whirlwind of emotions. The adrenaline that had fueled my initial reaction began to dissipate, leaving me with a profound sense of sadness and heartbreak for my daughter. I looked at her, trying to gauge how she was processing the traumatic experience. To my surprise, she seemed relatively composed, her eyes dry and her demeanor calm. "I'm okay, Mom," she assured me, her voice steady and resolute. "I don't want this to ruin our day." Her words struck me with a mix of pride and pain. On one hand, I was in awe of her resilience, her ability to remain strong in the face of such a disturbing incident. It was a testament to the brave and compassionate young woman she was becoming, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration for her grace under pressure. But on the other hand, my heart ached at the realization that my daughter had to muster such strength at all. At just 13 years old, she should have been free to enjoy her childhood, to bask in the innocence and carefree joy that every young person deserves. Instead, she was forced to confront the harsh realities of a world that too often preys on the vulnerable and the innocent. As I wrapped my arms around her, I felt the weight of my own emotions threatening to overwhelm me. The sadness that had been simmering beneath the surface began to bubble up, spilling over in the form of hot, silent tears. I cried for my daughter, for the pain and confusion she must have been feeling, for the loss of a piece of her innocence that she could never get back. I cried for myself, for the sense of helplessness and rage that consumed me, for the knowledge that no matter how fiercely I loved and protected my child, I could not shield her from the cruelty and injustice of the world. And I cried for all the women and girls who had endured similar experiences, for the countless souls who had been scarred by the actions of men who saw them as nothing more than objects to be used and discarded. Through my tears, I held my daughter tighter, whispering words of love and reassurance. "I'm so sorry, baby," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "You shouldn't have had to go through that. It's not fair and it's not right." She hugged me back, her small frame radiating a strength and compassion that belied her years. "I know, Mom," she said softly, "but I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay." Her words were a balm to my battered heart, a reminder that even in the darkest of moments, there was still hope to be found. Hope in the resilience of the human spirit, in the power of love and compassion to heal even the deepest of wounds. As we sat there holding each other amid the ruins of our perfect day, I made a silent vow to my daughter. I would not let this experience define her, would not let it dim the light that shone so brightly within her. I would do everything in my power to support her, to help her process and heal from the trauma she had endured. And I would continue to fight, to raise my voice against the injustices that plagued our world, to work towards a future where no child would ever have to face the kind of violation and betrayal that my daughter had experienced. It would not be an easy road, I knew. The scars of that day would linger, the memories forever etched into our hearts and minds. But I also knew that we would face the journey together, hand in hand, mother and daughter, warriors and survivors. As the day drew to a close and we made our way home, the weight of the incident continued to hang heavy on my heart. The drive was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to process the events that had unfolded. I glanced at my daughter in the rearview mirror, watching as she stared out the window, her face pensive and introspective. It was in that moment that the full magnitude of the situation hit me. This was not something that we could simply brush aside, a minor blip in an otherwise perfect day. No, this was an experience that would stay with my daughter forever, a memory that would shape her understanding of the world and her place within it. I thought back to my own childhood, to the moments that had defined my sense of self and my perception of the world around me. I remembered the joy and the laughter, the love and the security that had filled my early years. But I also remembered the darker moments, the times when I had been made to feel small, insignificant, or violated. Those experiences had stayed with me, shaping my attitudes and behaviors in ways that I was only beginning to fully understand. They had made me more cautious, more guarded, more acutely aware of the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of even the most seemingly innocent interactions. And now, my daughter had her own defining moment, a memory that would forever be etched into her consciousness. I knew that she would carry the weight of that experience with her, that it would color her perceptions and her choices in ways that I could only begin to imagine. The realization was a sobering one, a reminder of the lasting impact that such experiences can have on a young person's psyche. It was a reminder of the importance of not only supporting and validating our children in the aftermath of trauma, but also working to create a world where such traumas were less likely to occur in the first place. As we pulled into our driveway, I reached over and took my daughter's hand in my own. "I know today was hard," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "And I know that it's not something that you'll ever forget. But I want you to know that you are not alone, that I will always be here to support you and to help you through whatever challenges come your way." "Oh," she squeezed my hand back, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I know, Mom," she said, her voice filled with a quiet strength that took my breath away. "And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you." "Oh." We sat there for a moment, hand in hand, each of us drawing strength and comfort from the other. And as we finally made our way inside, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and determination washing over me. Yes, the road ahead would be difficult. Yes, there would be moments of pain and struggle, of anger and frustration. But there would also be moments of joy and laughter, of love and connection. And through it all, we would have each other, a bond that could never be broken, a love that would always endure. As I watched my daughter disappear up the stairs, her head held high and her spirit unbroken, I knew that we would weather this storm together. We would emerge stronger, wiser, and more committed to creating a world where every child could grow up feeling safe, valued, and loved. It would not be an easy journey, but it was one that we would undertake with courage, with compassion, and with an unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of challenges. And in that moment, I knew that we would be okay, that we would find our way through the darkness and into the light. In the days that followed the incident at the water park, I found myself consumed by a newfound sense of purpose. The more I reflected on what had happened to my daughter, the more I realized that her experience was not an isolated one. It was part of a much larger pattern, a systemic issue that affected women and girls across the globe. As I began to research the topic of sexual harassment, I was stunned by the statistics that I encountered. According to a recent study, a staggering 81% of women have experienced some form of sexual harassment in their lifetimes. Let that sink in for a moment. 81%. That means that for every 5 women you know, 4 of them have likely been subjected to unwanted advances, inappropriate comments, or physical violations. The number was almost too large to comprehend, a figure that spoke to the pervasiveness of the problem. It cut across all demographics, affecting women of every age, race, and socioeconomic background. It was a problem that knew no bounds, a scourge that had been allowed to fester and grow for far too long. As I delved deeper into the research, I felt a growing sense of disgust and shock washing over me. How had we, as a society, allowed this to happen? How had we created a culture in which women were seen as objects to be ogled, groped, and harassed with impunity? I thought back to my own experiences, to the countless times that I had been made to feel uncomfortable or unsafe in public spaces. I remembered the catcalls and the leering stares, the accidental brushes against my body on crowded trains and buses. I remembered the fear and the shame, the sense of powerlessness that had often accompanied those moments. And I realized that my experiences were not unique. They were part of a larger tapestry, a shared history of trauma and violation that connected women across time and space. It was a realization that filled me with both sadness and rage, a burning desire to do something, anything to change the status quo. I knew that I could not stand idly by, could not allow my daughter or any other woman to navigate a world in which their bodies and their boundaries were seen as fair game. I knew that I had to speak out, to use my voice and my platform to raise awareness and demand change. And so I began to do just that. I talked to my friends and family, sharing the statistics and the stories that I had uncovered. I wrote articles and blog posts, using my words to shine a light on the pervasive nature of sexual harassment and the toll that it takes on women's lives. I attended rallies and protests, joining my voice with those of other women who were tired of being silenced and marginalized. I lobbied my elected officials, demanding stronger laws and policies to protect women from harassment and abuse. And through it all, I held fast to the belief that change was possible, that we could create a world in which every woman and girl could live free from the threat of sexual violence. It would not be easy, I knew. It would require a fundamental shift in the way that we thought about and treated women, a radical reimagining of the power dynamics that had long defined our society. But I also knew that it was a fight worth fighting, a cause that demanded our attention and our action. And as I looked at my daughter, at the fierce determination and resilience that shone in her eyes, I knew that I would never stop fighting, never stop working to create a world that was worthy of her boundless potential. As I sit here, pouring my heart out onto the page, I find myself filled with a sense of gratitude and humility. To those of you who have taken the time to read my story, to bear witness to my pain and my struggle, I want to say thank you. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your compassion. I know that my experience is not an easy one to hear, that the topics of sexual harassment and abuse can be triggering and uncomfortable for many. But I also know that it is only by shining a light on these issues, by breaking the silence and the shame that so often surrounds them, that we can begin to create real and lasting change. And so I am grateful to each and every one of you who has chosen to listen, to engage, and to grapple with these difficult truths alongside me. Your support and your solidarity mean more than you can possibly know. But I also know that I cannot do this alone, that I need the wisdom and the guidance of those who have walked this path before me. And so I am reaching out to you, my fellow survivors, my sisters in arms, to ask for your help and your advice. How do I support my daughter through this difficult time? How do I help her to process the trauma and the pain, to rebuild her sense of safety and trust in the world around her? How do I empower her to find her voice, to stand up for herself and for others who may be facing similar challenges? I know that there is no one-size-fits-all answer, that every child's experience and needs are unique. But I also know that there is power in community, in the sharing of stories and strategies and hard-won wisdom. And so I am asking for your input, your insights, and your experiences. Whether you are a parent, a survivor, or simply someone who cares deeply about these issues, I want to hear from you. I want to learn from you, to grow alongside you, and to work together to create a world that is safer and more just for all of us. I know that the road ahead will not be easy, that there will be moments of pain and setback and frustration. But I also know that I am not alone, that I have the strength and the support of a community that spans the globe. Together we can create change. Together, we can build a world in which every child can grow up free from the threat of sexual violence, in which every survivor is believed, supported, and empowered to heal. It will not happen overnight, and it will not happen without struggle and sacrifice. But I believe that it is possible, that a better world is within our reach if only we have the courage and the conviction to fight for it. And so, I thank you once again for being a part of this fight, for lending your voice and your heart to this vital cause. Your presence and your partnership mean more than words can express. And to my daughter, my beautiful, brave, and resilient girl, I want to say this. I see you. I hear you. And I will never stop fighting for you, for your right to live in a world that cherishes and protects your boundless potential. Together we will rise. Together we will heal. And together, we will create a future that is worthy of your bright and shining spirit. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.